In 1979, a 22-year-old journalist enrolled in a real high school under a fake name, attended classes for an entire year, and took notes on everything he saw. 3 years later, the book he wrote became one of the most authentic teen films ever made and launched 3 Academy Award careers in the process. That was Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and the story behind it is considerably stranger than anything that happened inside Ridgemont's hallways. Today, 15 facts about Fast Times at Ridgemont High. From the future megastar who auditioned and lost, to the shoe that accidentally became the footwear of an entire decade, to the song so perfectly fused to its scene that it wasn't even on the soundtrack. Stick around for the bonus. It involves a fake name, a real high school, and a full year spent undercover. Fact 1. The teen comedy that accidentally launched 3 Oscar careers. Fast Times was supposed to be a disposable R-rated comedy. Nobody expected it to function as a launching pad. Sean Penn as Spicoli would win 2 Oscars for Mystic River and Milk. Forrest Whitaker, playing Charles Jefferson with a quiet rage that destroys a football team after his Camaro gets wrecked, would win Best Actor for The Last King of Scotland, and Nicolas Cage appears uncredited in the background, having auditioned for Brad and not gotten it. 1 Mall Food Court, 3 Academy Award careers. Most movies like this launch catchphrases. This one launched something considerably more permanent. Fact 2, Tom Cruise auditioned, and the film is better because he didn't get it. Before Top Gun, Tom Cruise auditioned for Brad Hamilton. He was fresh off taps, already radiating that locked-in intensity. That was exactly the problem. Brad needed to be humiliated. Cruise was too locked in to be humiliated convincingly. Enter Judge Reinhold, who brought peak 1980s everyman energy. Reinhold made Brad the guy you rooted for because you'd been him. Cruise would have made Brad the guy you were slightly afraid of. Cruise went on to become the biggest movie star on the planet. Reinhold put on a Captain Hook uniform and made it hurt in exactly the right way. Fact 3. Sean Penn showed up as Spicoli and never came back. When Penn walked in to meet director Amy Heckerling, he didn't open a script. He showed up like he'd wandered off the beach and told her he knew this guy. Heckerling later said she knew almost immediately. That's Spicoli. From day one, Penn stayed in character between takes, insisting everyone call him Jeff at all times. If you called him Sean, you got nothing. If you called out Spicoli, you got the full slow-motion surfer wave. Penn became one of the most intense dramatic actors of his generation. Spicoli remains his most quoted character. 40 years of prestige roles and 2 Oscars, and the world still won't let him forget the pizza. Fact 4. The band that toured with him as a teenager still said no. Crow had profiled Led Zeppelin for Rolling Stone and spent time on their tour bus as a teenager. So when assembling the Fast Times soundtrack, he wanted Zeppelin. Big riffs, big energy, perfect for California in the early 1980s. Led Zeppelin said no. Their iron-willed manager, Peter Grant, closed every door. Tour bus history didn't move the needle. Crow pivoted and found other tracks. The soundtrack worked. But imagine any Zeppelin track thundering over a Ridgemont High parking lot scene. That's an alternate 1982 the film came this close to having. Fact 5. 1 wardrobe choice accidentally turned a niche brand national. Penn selected the black and white checkerboard Vans slip-ons that became Spicoli's signature. At the time, Vans were a niche Southern California skate brand. Then Fast Times hit theaters. Every kid from Maine to Montana suddenly needed those slip-ons. There is no record of a formal product placement deal. Penn essentially handed Vans a 90-minute national commercial completely free of charge. 40 years later, you can still buy the same slip-ons in every mall in America. 1 actor, 1 wardrobe choice, 1 pair of shoes that became the unofficial footwear of an entire decade. Fact 6. The mall was real, and so were the confused shoppers in the background. Heckerling didn't want a fake backlot mall, she wanted the real thing. So they filmed inside the actual, fully operating Sherman Oaks Galleria. Some of those background shoppers were real 1982 mall-goers genuinely wondering what was happening near the Orange Julius. After Fast Times, the Galleria became the gold standard for teen movies. The original was redeveloped in the mid-1990s. But for 90 minutes, that mall lives forever. And so does the version of us who thought it was the center of the universe. Fact 7. The most memorable music cue in the film was a licensing problem nobody solved. The pool scene, the slow-motion exit, moving in stereo by the cars, permanently fused to that moment. One of the most recognized music cues in 1980s cinema. So naturally, when you rushed out to buy the official Fast Times soundtrack, it wasn't there. Gone, due to licensing constraints. If you wanted it, you had to buy the Cars' 1978 debut album separately. The most unforgettable musical moment in the film didn't make the film's own soundtrack. Fact 8. The pizza scene inspired a nationwide prank. Spicoli orders a full pizza to Mr. Hand's classroom. Delivery guy walks in mid-lecture. No shame, no hesitation. For high school kids in 1982, that wasn't fiction. It was a dare. Fast Times turned pizza to class into a nationwide copycat phenomenon. Every school in America suddenly had at least one kid calling Domino's from the payphone and giving the delivery driver a room number. Teachers spent the rest of the 1980s intercepting pizza guys and confiscating slices like contraband. All because one scene gave an entire generation the same terrible, beautiful idea at the exact same moment. 3 Oscar careers launched at a mall food court, a casting decision that kept Tom Cruise out of a Captain Hook uniform, and the film's most iconic song missing from its own soundtrack. We're not halfway through. Still coming, the plan that started 2 points shorter. The rock legend who laughed at Brad's worst moment, and later scored one of the greatest music films ever made. And the bonus, a fake name, a real high school, and everything that explains why this film feels so real. Fact 9. The plan that defined a generation started 2 points shorter. In Crow's original book, the plan was 3 points. When they adapted it for the screenplay, someone realized 3 rules weren't nearly enough to support Damon's persona, so they upgraded it. 5 points, more build-up, more delusion, more comedy. Romanis delivered it like a Harvard Business School masterclass. For 90 seconds, it sounds airtight. At least half the audience tried point 4 at a party. Lean against the wall, nod like you're above it all. Meanwhile, in the actual film, the plan crashes spectacularly. But for one glorious moment in 1982, Damon gave an entire generation completely unearned, wildly misguided confidence. 40 years later, people still quote it like peer-reviewed science. Fact 10. A 27-year-old first-time director built a blueprint on her first attempt. Fast Times was Heckerling's feature debut. She was 27, fresh out of the AFI Conservatory. In 1982, most directors would have treated this material as a punchline factory. Heckerling made you laugh, but she also made you feel something. The meltdowns are hilarious, but you ache for the guy because you've been the guy. She went on to direct Clueless over a decade later, nailing teenagers again in a completely different era. Most debut films get forgotten. Heckerling's became a blueprint. Fact 11. A rock legend had a cameo, and later scored her boyfriend's greatest film. Brad Hamilton is stuck at a red light in a Captain Hook uniform. A woman in the next car cracks up laughing. That woman was Nancy Wilson from Heart. Barracuda, Crazy on You, Hall of Fame guitar since the 1970s. The cameo happened because Wilson was dating Cameron Crowe. They married 4 years later. Wilson composed the score for Almost Famous, Crowe's film about his teenage years as a rock journalist. The woman who laughed at Brad Hamilton's worst moment eventually helped score one of the most beloved music films ever made. Fact 12. Mr. Hand was real, which explains everything. Mr. Hand was based on a real teacher obsessed with one concept: his time. Every whisper, every distraction, every rogue slice of pepperoni was a personal theft from the man's lifespan. They cast Ray Walston, who understood that true authority doesn't yell, it withers. Walston didn't explode. He observed. He paused. He delivered lines like a man calmly filing paperwork on your future. At 16, when he tore up those concert tickets, it felt like a federal offense. 30 years later, you quietly understand he had a point. Fact 13. The studio expected a throwaway. The audience had other ideas. Universal's plan: hand a first-time director $5 million, make a throwaway teen movie, move on, no awards expectations, just skin, angst, and popcorn. The film earned over $27 million domestically, more than 5 times its budget. The studio was convinced the R rating would kill them. Instead, a generation found creative solutions, helpful older siblings, distracted ticket takers, strategic timing. Everyone found a way in. Hollywood realized that if you treat teenagers like actual human beings with awkward moments and social humiliation, they will throw money at you. Fact 14. Spicoli wrecked the wrong car. Forrest Whitaker made it unforgettable. A Chevy Camaro Z28 in the early 1980s was high school parking lot royalty. Wrecking one meant someone was going to end you. Spicoli chose violence. We never see the crash, just the aftermath and Spicoli's panicked retelling. The cover-up. He pins the damage on Lincoln High. No alibi, just desperation and a dream. Jefferson takes whatever fury is left onto the football field and plays like the Z28's ghost is coaching him from the sideline. Forrest Whitaker, in one of his earliest roles, playing every beat with a quiet intensity that suggested something considerably larger was coming. He was right. Fact 15. How does a throwaway teen comedy leave marks that last 40 years? Fast Times left marks everywhere. Vans went national. Moving in stereo became permanently attached to a scene it wasn't even licensed to. Spicoli became the blueprint for every relaxed, philosophically unbothered character in American comedy that followed. Damone's 5-point plan is still quoted by people who haven't seen the film in 20 years. The movie Universal Expected to Disappear has been referenced and revisited for over 4 decades. It became a classic because one undercover journalist had spent a full year making sure every detail was real. And now, the bonus I've been saving for last. In 1979, Cameron Crowe was 22. He had toured with Led Zeppelin as a teenager and written for Rolling Stone. Instead of continuing that, he convinced the principal of Ridgemont High in San Diego to let him enroll as a senior under the name Dave Cameron, not as an observer, as a student. 1 full year, classes, pep rallies, cafeteria mystery meet, the whole experience. He documented everything, parking lot conversations, the kid who actually had a pizza delivered to class, every moment written down like a war correspondent embedded in 10th period. When the book came out, the students at Claremont finally understood what had happened. The quiet older kid who never said much in homeroom had been writing everything down. Spicoli was inspired by real students, Crowe observed. Brad Hamilton was drawn from students he'd befriended. Mr. Hand's obsession came from a real teacher. The 5-point plan came from a real kid in a real hallway. That's why Fast Times doesn't sound like adults guessing what teenagers talk like. The dialogue came from actual conversations in actual hallways, documented by a 22-year-old who raised his hand in a school he had no business being in and said, "Yeah, I'm Dave. I'm new here." He spent a year taking notes. The world spent 40 years quoting them.